Hello and welcome to Start the Beat with Sykes. My name is Sykes and this is my podcast. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everyone who checked out the last episode. If you're one of those people, I hope you enjoyed the conversation and thanks so much for coming back. But for everyone out there who's new to the show, welcome. Feel free to make yourselves at home. And as always, there's beer, soda, water, coffee in the fridge. Cheers to everyone out there on the internet. So, one of the things that is, really shitty about being in a band is that you have these passions and this drive to do all of this stuff, right? And that's why you keep doing what you're doing. But there's so much other stuff that I feel like neither of us give a fuck about. Like needing to promote and schmooze and wine and dine fucking ding dongs that you don't fucking care about to try to get them to somewhat give a shit about your band when all you fucking want to do is show up and play.
Yeah.
But in order to get onto some stages or get certain opportunities, you really gotta question or at least I've found that I gotta tap into a side of myself, a person that doesn't actually exist in me. I gotta try to become somebody else to hype myself up, especially in this underground metal community. And what has it been like for you over the years? Because you seem like a pretty calm, collected guy. You're on stage, you play guitar, you look scary and angry, but outside of that, you probably just want to I want to keep to myself. I don't feel like dealing with a lot of bullshit. You seem like that kind of guy.
I very much am. Yeah, I don't like human beings.
So
That's really what it comes down to.
Again, all of this back end stuff, it's so social, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to kind of, it's not, I don't know if I'd call it force yourself to just be a part of a scene as a whole, because you do enjoy it in a lot of aspects of it, but you definitely for the self-marketing, you've got to kind of, talk to more people than you probably want to, or interact. Right. You have to send way more emails than you would like to in a day, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, not only do you got to talk to people about yourself, but you have to be
constant
this is fucking
mode.
Awesome, right?
Yeah.
And while it's I'm sure you are very confident in the stuff that you put out, and I know you probably like it. I like my stuff. I have a hard time telling somebody you should listen to this because it's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It just seems absurd to me to say that to somebody.
It's not enough of a point to make
yeah.
Everybody, because as the other side of it, it's the consumer or promoter that you're trying to kind of get in with, or labels or whatever. Yeah. Of course, to you, your music's awesome, and it took me a really long time to be able to step outside myself and view my band for what it is. Because when we were first really kind of coming up in the MySpace era, you know, I had no idea what I was doing. I was 22, 23, and I'm oh, cool, I'm in a band, and oh, we're signed, and I'm on tour. But I had no idea how any of it worked. I was I just thought, you get signed, and then you're touring with Motley Crue after that. That was yeah. There was nothing in between. It was just, okay, we signed the contract. Where's my bus?
Sure, cool.
And I kind of learned the hard way, and definitely burned a couple of bridges that I shouldn't have, just by not understanding that music is very much a business, at least to industry people. Yes, obviously they care about music because there's plenty of industries that make money, that make a lot more money than music does. So they do care about music, but they also have to run their business, and they have to operate. No one gets into any business to break even or to lose money.
The thing that's so weird about this metal shit is it's a very youth-driven culture. So it's regardless of what they like and regardless of what music you like that you're making, they're going to go for whatever sells. So that's whatever the fucking kids like.
Exactly.
And, neither of us are getting any younger. And while I'm into, I respect the newer generation of stuff. But I mean, even when bands, a lot of deathcore stuff was new at the time, it wasn't my thing. Yeah. And then I've had a hard time being in a metal band since, because we've been perpetually stuck in 2003 for the past fucking 12 years, but that's just what we like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'd rather just do something that I like, and maybe one day it'll loop around and some people will like it. But for me, it's always been more of like I think it's really important to do something that you believe in instead of like trying to cater to like nothing. You don't want to be like the, pushing 40 and trying to cater to 20-year-olds. Like they're going to see right through that shit,
And it's like, it's weird because that's another thing that kind of took me just years to understand this. Like, while the younger audience is probably the majority of it, there's still a huge market like in the next kind of age group up where it's like mid-20s to like 40, where that's like the real, and it's like the music that I, at least for metal, like that I listen to most of the time is like older guys metal. Like they're not old bands, they're just like the scene for it tends to not be like kids, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of like a band that's a good example of that. That's new. Like there's this band, I think they're from England, called Conjurer.
Okay.
They're like kind of somewhere between hardcore and like doom in a sense. Like the doom and hardcore crowd tends to be like older than like the deathcore crowd or the metalcore crowd even. And there's a lot there's a lot of room in that age demographic that you can still like completely succeed in, and I think music will always do that. Like, the stuff that, like how old are you?
35.
Oh, me too. All right. 86, bud.
Boom.
Like the stuff that we grew up on, obviously, like usually you just like the stuff that you liked when you were a kid, but you still like the same shit. But there's new bands that come out that I'm still probably the target demographic for, even though they're not an old band. They're not even necessarily older people in the bands, but it still like appeals to someone like me who like, I don't necessarily like the same metal that an 18-year-old kid would. I do in a sense because I play it technically, like I still play in a deathcore band, but like
I think I would call you guys like, oh, definitely. I don't know if I would put it in the deathcore realm. I think there's hints.
Thank you.
I think there's hints of it, for sure. But I think that it's just more. I don't know. It's chaos. I would just call the breathing process chaos.
That's a good description.
You know what I mean? It's like
more people thought of it like
symphonic chaos.
I think I'm gonna brand that from now on. Yeah, like so kind of what I was saying before, like when we were first kind of on our first run with the band, when deathcore was first really happening, and it was still very much like in its infancy. So to us, like we didn't think of ourselves as deathcore ever because it was still a new term even.
Sure.
And then once it started to catch on more, to me, we didn't sound anything like Suicide Silence or Whitechapel or anything like that. So when people called us a deathcore band, I was always like, how? Like, I don't get it. Like,
sure.
But we play like black metal-y chords and stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
but the longer time has gone on and I've like kind of observed that era as a whole, I get it. Like we were in the same scene. We're touring with the same bands. We're like, we're signed to a label that has like deathcore bands and stuff. So, now I kind of get why, because we at the core of us, like that's what we are. We just have a very heavy black metal influence, and over the years, we've kind of slowly or gradually like swapped the positions. So right now, like everyone calls it blackened deathcore, and we're trying, especially with our new album, it's like we're more of a deathcore influenced black metal band than a black metal influenced deathcore band. Now,
yeah, I think, I mean, like, I guess like the whole like deathcore term seems so silly to me because I feel like, it's like, okay, what are we talking about? Death metal and hardcore together, right? In some form. So like what elements of hardcore are we talking about? Like, oh, like the grooves that you break into? mixed with blast beats. Like, well, there's death metal bands that do that, or like slam bands, you know. So it's like, then where do we put those bands? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
there's so many like funny.
Like if you listen to like old Dying Fetus, right? Like, is that like proto deathcore?
Fetus, like any.
But yeah, but I mean, like back in the day, nobody was like they're a deathcore band. Has anybody ever called Dying Fetus a deathcore band?
Or like Suffocation's another good example of that. Like, they had breakdowns, if you call it that,
just like heavy groove parts.
Yeah,
you know?
like that. So. And that's I've seen a lot of like online debate as far as like who was the first deathcore band and stuff. And it's like if you really start going down the rabbit hole, like, you can find stuff like early Suffocation or Dying Fetus. Like they've always been heavy bands. They've always had blast beats. Just they don't have the kind of hardcore style syncopated like repeating chug pattern breakdowns.
Sure, there's no like. I think like maybe some elements of what is like deathcore have like a surprising like pop influence in terms of like song structure, and I don't want to say predictability, but reliability. Yeah, like you know that like this is the part when the breakdown's gonna come. This is the black. You get it. It's a reliable format as a listener.
Right. It's I guess I mean in a weird way you could look at it as simplified death metal.
Sure.
I guess like it's. And maybe that's where the hardcore influence comes in, because hardcore isn't like an extremely technical genre.
Oh, sure, yeah, it's not.
There are technical sounding hardcore bands for sure, but as a standard, like
we need like a prog core scene to start up.
I feel like that exists because everything exists, but I can't think of a band that I would call prog core, because if it was, they would like what would be the difference between that and like tech death? You know, it's like kind of. The same. It seems like you could call it progressive death metal.
The genre thing is so weird because like when Greywalker was first getting started, like we really got lumped. Like people were like, "Oh, like it's metalcore," and like I guess like I can kind of hear it in the way that maybe you could hear deathcore in some elements of, you know, breathing process, but. It's like, okay, when I think of like metalcore, I think of like Bullet for My Valentine or Killswitch Engage or Parkway Drive. It's like the only cool metalcore band that I can think of off the top of my head would be like Shadows Fall. But like we're like not even in that. It's not really what we're doing.
To me, you guys are like more of a like Swedish mellow death kind of band. Although the one metal, like I don't know if I'll get like killed for calling this band metalcore, but I'm like I came up in like the. You know, I don't know, I think you'd call it technically the second wave, which was like bands like Killswitch and Shadows Fall and stuff.
Yeah.
But Darkest Hour, you guys remind me of a lot.
Yeah.
In that sense, because they're not, the Darkest Hour doesn't rely on like breakdowns or anything like that. They're just the melodic riffs and the fast.
And that's, we've never had like a couple of the older songs have kind of breakdowny parts. They're like some syncopation stuff, but there's never been like a breakdown in a Greywalker song. Like a very like, you know, like Unearth style sort of like
in the hardcore sense.
Yeah, that's never man, Unearth. Killer band. Jesus Christ.
I saw the Endless EP release show in a VFW hall, and it was madness.
I believe it.
Because like our band is initially from Connecticut, where I grew up, and then I moved here and kind of remade it in a sense. So the scene that I was like kind of coming up in before I was like really a serious like musician was all bands like that, like Unearth and Killswitch. I was at the Fixation on the Darkness video shoot. It was at this club called Fat Cats, and it was completely sold out. Me and my friend just happened to like score tickets like the day of, like before it sold out. And I remember like getting out of school and driving up to, because I mean, Springfield is only like 20 minutes away from where I grew up, and just getting to see like bands like that, but in their like early days, you know, like when they were still kind of grinding in the underground, it's so cool to see like just where they've taken the genres of music and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Like Killswitch was always the talk of the town or the scene back then, because they were like, yo, they just signed to Roadrunner Records and like they're gonna be here. And then like a year later, they were the biggest metalcore band on earth. they're still probably top 5 at
Oh,
least.
easily.
Top
Yeah.
3 maybe in terms of, popularity. I think Bring Me the Horizon's probably the tip top, but I don't know if you'd really call them metalcore anymore.
I
Because
don't.
they're different.
Yeah.
Like that era of metalcore versus like what came after,
Uh-huh.
which kind of started with Under Oath and what was that album?
Well, they had their own interesting
The Changing of Times.
Oh, okay.
That was when they started, like, because
the old Under Oath, right?
yeah, well, that was they were like on the borderline of like death metal. The first Cries from the Past EP, but when I completely spaced on the album name that I just said.
Changing of Times.
Changing of Times. When that album came out, that to me is like what changed metalcore from like the more Swedish death metal influence to what it is now, which is like more melodic, more singy chorus.
All the like radio pop sort of.
Yeah.
The reliability again.
Yeah.
Yeah, they brought all that in for sure.
Absolutely. Back then, like everything was metalcore before all the subgenres started getting split up. Because now, like people go back and listen to stuff like one of my favorite bands ever is Blood Has Been Shed, which was Howard Jones's band before he joined Killswitch. They were just like a local Connecticut band, but they were signed like to Ferret. They'd been, they have like national recognition. They just weren't as big as Killswitch was. And when you listen to them now, most people would probably call them a deathcore band, but at the time, deathcore didn't exist. Everything that was like screaming and breakdowns was all just considered pretty much metalcore.
Yeah.
Unless you were like a straight up like hardcore band. If you were just nothing but beatdowns or like the kind of Youth Crew style hardcore with more chanty vocals and stuff like that, like Bane.
Yeah, there wasn't as much crossover. And I think that's why a lot of that stuff blew up, because it was like, you can do this?
Yeah.
And it's funny because like metal is such a young genre of music in the way that we know it. I mean, you can go back maybe 50 or 60 years if you want to like dig into like the origins, like one of those like nerdy documentaries, which are cool. No beef.
I do that all the time.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But like for like extreme heavy metal, you know what I mean? Like we're starting in the 80s with the extreme stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then, so from 1980, like extreme metal has been around pretty much as long as we have. Yeah. In a lot of ways.
I don't even know if I'd go back to even the earth. Like, I feel like it was like mid and late 80s when it was really like a thing.
Well, sure. Right? I think like, like if you take like, I think, like your Slayers and your Metallicas and your Exoduses and, all that, those bands that were coming up in the early mid 80s, getting real big. They were the ones that really like, at least on a popular level, like they were big enough to be playing like huge places. So I'm sure there were a lot of underground bands too that like influenced them to get to that next level, right?
Yeah.
And but it's so funny where it's like we're only talking about like, like a 30, 40-year period, and music's been around for thousands of years.
Right.
So of course it's going to change so much. It's just we need to like calm down on the subgenre things. We already have 5 million subgenres in a 40-year period. What's going to happen in the next 2 decades?
Right.
How are we going to be able to keep up
Every
with all
band is going to be their own genre pretty soon.
Yeah.
Like, or if it keeps kind of going like that, I guess. But the thing is, like, and I see so many kids like argue over what is classified as what genre. Like, even on, some of our videos where like I'll read comments and people are like, this isn't black and go listen to this. That's black and it's like, well, okay, but why is like this? What are the indicators here? Because there's only so many things you can put into music, before it's not music anymore.
Yeah, if you can take an entire, like, there's no way to just take an entire subgenre of music and like associate it with like one song.
Yeah,
like I feel like a genre should be able to be flexible and have a lot of different potentials.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it shouldn't be its own genre if it's so like niche.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, that's what I kind of like what I said before. Like, we never noticed that we were a part of any genre. Like, to us, we're just playing what we want to play, and like, we listened at the time to like black metal and listen to a lot of death metal. So we were like, one day it was like a light bulb. We wrote a song that had like some orchestra stuff on it, and we started changing kind of the chord progressions from the more melodic metalcore stuff to more minor chord tremolo stuff. And I was like, whoa, this sounds really cool. Let's keep writing songs like this.
Yeah.
And now in 2021, it's like its own kind of subgenre where it's blackened deathcore.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that like why do we need to put all of these labels on things and be like, I'm a black and deathcore guy. Like
Right.
I'm a stoner doom guy. I'm like a progressive power metal guy. Like, like
I guess it does help.
I guess I mean
it gives, if someone tells me something like that, I can like, okay, I got an idea of like the type of bands you listen to, I guess.
Yeah.
So that way it's helpful. It's just like the argument over who belongs in this subgenre or this subgenre or this one. Like I read a whole argument thread about who was the first deathcore band, and some people would argue that there's this band from California called Antagony, I think they were called. And people, and I remember commenting once, like, you have to understand, like, at that time, and you're talking like late 90s, maybe early 2000s, when like just that was when Antagony was around, but just the kind of the building blocks to the deathcore genre kind of started around.
I think of like,
but it depends on where you're from, because the internet wasn't like a huge thing then. And kids, I mean, of course, in 2021, it's like, what do you mean we didn't have internet in every aspect of our lives? Like, but back in that time, like, it really wasn't like you didn't have internet on your phone. You couldn't
like there was
you couldn't
internet,
just go on like YouTube and type in like, death metal and have 100 different options in front of you.
Not when we were in high school.